about to
Good to
go. All right. All right. This is live now. So we're recording another episode of Ay, 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 ay,
Ay, ay, ay, ay, ay. I can't do that.
go.
I
My
got a
God.
little bit of a sore
Ay,
throat.
ay, ay, ay.
Welcome, welcome.
Her sounded like it came from California.
Yeah, mine
True
sounded
to the roots
like a dead chicken. That is horrible.
from the
Uh,
Amazon forest. So
hey,
Mine sounds like, I'm trying, but it's not working. So another episode of Ay, 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 where we discuss artificial intelligence, machine learning, uh, aka data,
mhm.
right? But aka the world that we live in, right? So we really have to cover many aspects of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and that's what we've been specializing on mainly, right? We're about 65 episodes deep. I don't think we talked about a single topic over and over. But if there was a one topic that we've always pointed towards and hinted towards, but never really tapped into it very often, is mental health. We haven't really tapped into the psychological impact of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Uh, but you know, this is an opportunity to start that conversation and kind of dive in deep with somebody who knows what they're talking about. Because we can get excited about mental health all we want, but we need the subject matter experts to bring the light into it. So we have that subject matter expert today, right? We have Maya in the house. Um, and one thing I want to say about Maya is that I have probably a short list of people. Every time I talk to them, I wish I recorded the whole conversation and published it out to the people so that way people can hear it. Maya is one of those people that I talked to, and I said, like, man, we should have recorded that hour and a half long conversation we had. It would have been a perfect podcast. We're just chatting away, So lucky, this is a conversation to have, and I know you have some interest in it, and you probably have lots of these questions as well. So, what do you think, Lucky?
Well, definitely, the conversation today is going to be one that's near to me because I think I'm crazy. So definitely, mental health is something that concerns us all. And then, we have family also that we all have family members that either are in the service or have been through things and struggle. And so today, we're going to cover, a very, dear topic to me and myself. And Maya, thank you for being here. Um,
thank
you know,
you.
it,
Thank you
it,
for having me, both of you.
can you give us a little bit more, understanding of, because we discussed it earlier in the post, I mean, in the pre, it just, my mouth dropped. I was like, okay, you've done, I don't know. I've never met an individual like yourself. So thank you for being here and taking time with us today to discuss this topic. So, yeah, can you give us a little bit of background of, who you are and what your focus is? And thank you for being here again.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, and I'll make it brief, but I am a neuroscientist by training. I've also, by education, I would say I'm a pharmacologist. I've gotten my PhD in pharmacology. I've worked in across dementia, HIV-related dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's during my academic career. I have had, since I was a kid, a very innate interest on the business side of things too. I've got two sides of the family, one that's very much into academics, the other that was always into business. So just right, even the idea of these don't need to be mutually exclusive. You can actually tie the two, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to make a living, and we're all trying to ensure that, right, everything's based on economy. So I had that innate interest during my time at Stanford doing my postdoc. I decided to go to the Business School for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And I'd already started thinking about the third leg of the stool, which is technology and how that's pacing, right? Beyond the dot-com era, we now had technology in every aspect of our lives. And I think probably all of us, if I know Asif and I definitely are on the rate when we used to actually put a request in 4 phone calls and get a landline to now where we are. So technology became like very important to me as well. And I started working with a few startups that were tech companies looking to enter the life sciences and, helping bridge that. And so that's always been a passion, I'd say, for the past 15 plus years. I've been working at the nexus of it. And, as life would have it, I've been able to do that. Of course, staying true to the core of it, which is I am a neuroscientist at heart. I do think about how do we connect the dots across things. I think with that, being able to connect the dots is important. There's a lot of caveats and a lot of challenges I think we have ahead of us, but nonetheless, thinking about that. And a different element that's very important to me is conscious planet, how we all live our lives. We can't miss that element, no matter how successful we become, how much we thrive in our careers or in life in general. With that, thinking about the following generations that we're going to leave behind and what we're going to leave behind for them, and I think the time starts now, and we can get into it more as we talk.
Yeah. So if you're listening into this conversation, now you can start feeling the value of what we're about to get into, right? So anybody who's been thinking about AI, but also been thinking about technology, thinking about how to make profit, business, and all of a sudden you realize it's about you, not necessarily everybody else, right? Because it impacts you just like it would impact everybody else. So how do you make sure you get enough information about this technology so that way you can take care of yourself? So through business, you can take care of other people. And when you take care of other people, you're successful, right? Because if you don't take care of other people, well, sorry, but you'll figure it out how that goes. um, I think when we talk about what you just said, the technology and the business side, that is the core focus. But you always have to pivot away from that and look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing? How am I going to live this life? Right? I guess it's an age-old question. It's not necessarily an artificial intelligence question, right? Um, I want to start with an example of what it means to have ourselves augmented, because the conversation can go in hundreds of different directions when we talk about AI. But here's the thing: artificial means it's augmenting our intelligence. It's an AI, artificial intelligence only. It's augmenting intelligence. So I kind of use that example of like you can go really far without shoes on, but if you have shoes on, the shoes will augment you to get further. And if you meet other people that have shoes on, you're gonna go with them to wherever they're going, right? So AI technology is not going to be that much of a difference, right? There's two types of people that will talk about like AI from the perspective of this is total dystopian, and then there's total utopian. I don't think that's the case at all with artificial intelligence. So 10 years from now, you can come back to me and say, like, I see if you're wrong. I'm gonna be okay with that. But my assumption here is just like every other technology, it's just a matter of if you have good understanding of it, you will deploy it. But because AI impacts the whole world, we will have to really take a different approach than any other technologies, right? So if you started with shoes, shoes been around for a very long time, right? Prior to that, we didn't have shoes. What did we do before that? Well, that's not necessarily a conversation to have. It's a matter of what happens now that we have artificial intelligence going forward. If we don't have a good grasp of it, we probably will utilize it for the wrong purposes, right? And that's the big threat that everybody's so excited about with AI is that this is harmful. This could be bad, right? Well, a lot of people think about bad as in like, I will lose my business, I will lose some advantage of the technology, but what else do I lose? And I think this is the conversations we're going to have where we talk about the fact that if you lose your mental faculty or the degradation of it, has this technology augmented us or did it augment somebody else? Or did it not augment anybody? We just destroyed ourselves using, let's call it misinformation or disinformation, right? That's the power of AI. It can do lots of misinformation. So I want to set that stage for that because when we talk about our faculties, we just kind of take that for granted. Because when we talk about Alzheimer's dementia, what an example of what happens when your mental faculty degrades. What does that do to you, and what's the chances of that happening to you, and what sort of impact it leaves in the world? And then you look at everybody else, kind of like say, like, hey, you just get older. But if your mental faculty stays sharp and very well, that means you have taken care of your mental faculties for with the right tools and the right sort of practice, right? Meditation and just being in the right group of people, eating the right type of food, all sorts of things, right? So there's a KPI that you see at the end of life, not necessarily as you go through that use of that mental faculties, right?
Right,
Um,
right.
so let's jump into it. Let's hear from everybody here. Like, where where are we today, and where are we heading with this new technology?
Yeah, and I think, Asif, when we talk about technology and incorporation, right, I think it's always been a fear that we've had that technology is going to take over what we're doing, or it's going to outdate what we're doing now and how we're doing it. For instance, even when we think about the camera and when we Kodak and these businesses that we earlier talked about that were in Rochester, New York, like when we had those original cameras with the reels and things like that, we thought, okay, the photographers were concerned when digital cameras came into place, but then you find a way to utilize that, and photography has not gone out of practice. People are still photographers. They've right. So I think there is that ability to adapt and augment even what we're doing in our day to day. We are at a juncture now with AI where we feel it's that dependency that it's creating potentially, that if you're not conscious about it, you are going to lose that human connection, because our entire dependency is going to come to seeking answers easily through right something that we have created but now is teaching itself, right? The algorithms are, so it's similar to us as human minds. All three of us have had different experiences. We've got different data inputs into our neuronal networks. We've got right different trigger points that are going to start an algorithm within our brains that are going to allow us to react probably in different ways, right? All three of them. And I think it's the same idea that applies to AI as well. As we think about it, is it's really it's a real great place to be for us today because the possibilities are immense. It comes down to how do we progress with it? Do we lose that human connection? Do we take that responsibility? Are we even ourselves conscious enough to think about it and see how it's going to impact, right? And there's just a quick example was the example recently where, right, we heard the sad news of someone committing suicide because they were talking to AI, right? AI bot, and they had a relationship there. And, just overall, even if that was a cause of it, if we, even when we think about this mental health pandemic and this loneliness pandemic, if we use AI to build something, we have to do it very responsibly because, again, is that really alleviating these concerns we have, or is it actually adding to the concerns we have? Because you're also losing the human component, right? So I think it's a very complex question that needs to be broken down from a solution perspective and really thoughtfully over time needs to be applied.
Wow, that I was not aware that that AI have already affected us in that way. I was thinking more as you're talking and I'm putting together my thoughts. It's like, well, we're going to lose touch because of possible generational awareness, where the first, like ourselves, we saw this, you know, come from nothing, basically from dirt, and all of a sudden we have something that grew, and we saw it grow. We know we can identify it, where others were born with the vine in front of them, and they just see it as something that is just what they was normal, and it doesn't seem like they're losing anything by using these technologies. They're just how it is. And so, but having someone, already, that's a horrible thing, and it brings a lot of awareness that we've got to start, being more responsible and how we handle these technologies. AI as a benefit, the way when we started is, there's different ways that you look at AI. Of course, you can get the life imitates art. We have cyborgs, or the reality is, if the true benefits, if if AI is used for health, then there's going to be but positive. What I feel is, well, I don't know. I've written some things where I question myself too. But for the most part, if it's helping us in a positive way, helping us with our health, the AI is definitely, it shouldn't be where people are scared of it. It's going to exponentially increase our understandings of why we are how we are, and people like yourself, can bridge that gap between technology and medical health. And so, how are you bridging that gap? If you don't mind me asking, what are the things that you're working on?
Yeah, so for me, the first part is building that awareness, right? Is talking about it so that we can build that awareness. The other piece that I've done, which is actually not necessarily related immediately to technology, but takes us back to this component of ourselves, is
Mhm.
I've been a meditator all my life. Of course, yoga was introduced to me at a very young age. I've been asked to start thinking about teaching yoga since I was 16 by mother, and I finally took that step because right in and it's amazing, lucky, in terms of even being a student of pharmacology and physiology, working with pharma biotech over the years, working in academia. I've got a spouse who's a scientist, so this is consistently what we're thinking about. But in that time that I've been training and focusing more on how my body functions, I've learned so much. And this was a topic that Asif and I talked about previously, is if there's so much without technology that yogis could understand. With technology, you're right, we shouldn't be fearful about it. But with that, and of course, that's aided us in understanding the human physiology, our anatomy, and all those different pieces, right, over the years. But to me, right now, it's more about building that awareness of, as we understand, the thing is, as we understand more, we realize how much we don't know, right? It's you go and talk to a scientist, that's what they're going to say, right? We go down, like I said, I started at working on Alzheimer's for my thesis. I started thinking about the whole big problem, right, of AD. As we start going into in our thesis, as you start going, you start digging into a cell, you start digging into a protein, you start digging in. So there's a whole macrocosm inside that. So you think big picture, you go in and you realize there's a whole universe under it. So to me, right now, it's really about, one is understanding myself more so I can, right, truly see how things are impacting me. Other is also luckily the ecosystem I have around me is very tuned into it as well. So it's working with them to also bring this level of consciousness so that as we think about how we incorporate technology into our day-to-day lives, or when do we disconnect and when do we connect to technology, how much dependency do we have on technology, when do we decide that we actually need to bring that, let's say, human wisdom or our thinking into it, that has become extremely important, right? The other piece that just in day-to-day dealings I'm seeing is a big generational gap. So you're right, people that the next generation, as you guys define the natives, right, and the immigrants, the natives have been born into it. But the component that's missing is, again, in my mind, this idea of technology aiding us, in many ways augmenting them, but taking away the life experiences that perhaps our generation has or the previous generations have had, So my quest is also, and I've been trying to work through this puzzle of, how do we get the native immigrants to understand, the digital immigrants to understand the digital natives? Because there's a huge gap. Whether we look at the life science industry, whether you look at even within your family, the day-to-day dealings, right? So the idea is, how do we bridge that? How do we make it translatable for both generations? Because I think it needs to be a two-way street versus just the immigrants understanding where technology is going, because we need their wisdom to inform it and to guide the next generation into it. but we need them to be open to listening to the next generation of what is possible and why technology.
I, I want to hit on a few things, but I think we're getting to a point where we can actually, draw a complete picture here, right? Because what you just said right now is that you have to communicate, but you have to know how to communicate, right? And communication is what bridges the gap, right? If I communicate with Maya, I just communicate with Maya. But if I communicate with Maya and everybody that knows Maya and then everybody that knows me, now I've communicated in a different sense. So I'm bridging the gap, not just between me and Maya, but me and Maya and the network, right? There's lots of nodes out there that says, you know what? I know enough, but I don't know who knows enough to tell me more, right? That's where your known unknown comes in. Because we talk about all the time in our workshops is that known unknown, and then there's unknown unknown. The reason you see many of the spectacles today that are kind of sitting on the edge saying like, we're not really ready to jump in is because of this fact that they know enough to know that there's a lot of unknowns. But the unknown unknowns subconsciously hold us back a lot more than we can think of. Because if we knew how to tackle that invisible enemy that we haven't met yet, we sort of get to know the fact that there's a known unknown now. It's not unknown unknown anymore. If I knew how to tackle that invisible enemy, what does that invisible enemy look like? It's that hardware that I haven't seen before or heard about before. Now all of a sudden it shows up as a choke point. So if I was to invest into an AI, all of a sudden that AI is not working because of this hardware, this unknown hardware. What do I do next, right? So bridging the gap to me comes down to that unknown unknown. As in, like, look, what is unknown to you, to somebody else, it's a known, right? But you have to know those people. You have to talk to them, right? People that has these unknown literally on their daily lives happening, they deal with it all the time. And if you don't talk to them, if you don't communicate with them, you will never move forward. It's just that you have any problems there. I'm just saying you will not, because even I won't, right? If I had to leave my house right now to go to the grocery store, I'm gonna go. That's a known unknown for me. Unknown to me is going to the space, to leave my house and go to the space, get on the rocket ship and go to space. But if I talk to a rocket scientist all the time and I figure out a way to get into a rocket and go to space, that becomes my known unknown. I haven't been there before, right? So one of the ways that conversation kind of goes into more and more of is that you hear about AI all day long, but what you don't hear about is your human intelligence, right? Because the audience that is invisible is the human intelligence. We're not talking about human intelligence at all. So when you use certain terminologies like, neural networks, and you're talking about the facts that are known unknown, well, these are the same problem that AI has, just like a human brain does, right? The reason AI is not so impactful it is because it's sitting on its known unknowns, because it knows very well what it knows and what it's been trained on. What it doesn't know is that known unknown, and definitely that unknown unknown, correct? It's the same problem with AI, just like it's a human intelligence will have the same problem. We'll sit on the shelves until we know somebody can walk us through that, guide us through that process. So Maya, when you said like, I do yoga, but now I'm going to teach people how to do yoga. It's like I'm meeting that rocket scientist for the first time who's going to walk me through the rocket steps and then take me to the space, right? Show me how to do yoga. So these human intelligence and artificial intelligence conversation really is like looking internally at yourself and say, how do I operate? And what are the deltas between me and the AI, right? What does my brain do in order to take in information? Well, let me use some of the terminologies that we always use for AI. AI needs sensors. AI needs data collection point.
Mhm.
Does your body have the same? Absolutely. Let's just use that word. I think we don't get in trouble for that. So, yeah,
So,
exactly. Because the other one, I was like, no, I can't do that.
mhm.
So, point is, your five sensors data collection point, and these data collection point is unstoppable. There's no turning these things off. With AI, if you want the same results, well, we have to work towards that because AI. There's a point where AI does not turn off.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that, but I don't think we can talk about it here today. But the point is, your brain is literally been collecting using those 5 collection point of data, which is your tactile senses, your auditory cortex, and your computer vision, which is look at your eyes, right? Your visual cortex, and then you have your taste buds and your smell. These 5 senses are continuously is collecting data and processing those data to get you to a point of making a decision. And this blows people's mind away all the time. We make about 30 to 35,000 decisions a day. And we've been making those decisions every day for as long as you can think of being conscious.
Mhm.
So if we were to think about the human intelligence, say, how would AI, mimic that? Well, you kind of get the comfort of knowing that AI is not there yet. And because of AI's unknown, AI will not get there tomorrow. But even if it does, because of the infrastructure that we know of how AI works, we know how to control it, right? Um, I will not talk about AI washing, all this AI hypes, all the lies about AI. We'll just put that aside, pretend like it doesn't exist. But if you understand your spinal structure, like how your spine is the central highway into your brain and how that's central highway to the rest of your body, you will say, well, does AI have that? Well, if AI doesn't, how would it operate, right? So all these things combined, just by understanding our body, we get to understand AI in a different sense. To me, that has been the most rewarding aspect of artificial intelligence. Because when you talk about technologies like cybersecurity, you don't care about your body that much. You don't care about your body when you talk about cloud system, blockchain systems, or because I talk about cloud blockchain like on a daily basis, but nothing excites me as much as AI does because AI is literally trying to mimic who I am. But if I know enough about myself, I can get to learn about AI. Cloud is not the same way, right? Cloud is like either you know cloud or you don't, right? Go figure it out, maybe. But if you understand your body a little bit more and you understand AI, I think we will come to a total different conclusion about AI. And Maya, thanks for hitting on those points because these are my favorite topics, and I love talking to you about these things. These are so exciting.
Yeah, and I think we generally, right, we don't talk about it. We talk about technology, we talk about AI, we talk about us using it. But like you said, I think that's a very valid point. And I think an important one is that this is where we've truly brought something that we had only imagined about to life. We are actually mirroring our brain in these systems, right? You've got your neural networks, you've got your nodes, you've got the edges that mimic the synapses. We are literally trying to put our neurons on a plate or in a chip and say in systems and say, hey, actually do all this computing that my we can do it. So we're creating in a way, if I may take it that far, it's not just artificial intelligence. We're creating, right? At the end of the day, we're going towards this where we're saying, oh, there's going to be these AI driven like bots that we're going to create, or we're going to mirror ourselves. There's going to be an army of us that we're going to generate. And that's the direction we're heading in. And I think it's now that we have to take the responsibility. We've gotten some use cases. We've gotten open AI use cases. We're using generative AI across different industries, including the life sciences. But then it's an idea of as we scale it, as we get more information, as we compute more information, as we think about other use cases, right? How are we going to do that in a manner that is responsible, that is ethical, right? How do we deem what is responsible, what is ethical? An example here is what we just talked about is someone who's talking to fill in their loneliness is talking to a bot. It helps them. But now when the person's passed on, we're blaming AI. Was it the AI? Was it the person? Would that individual need guidance? How do we? And when we talk about technology, because this is a very strong area of passion for me, is we need to bring digital technology into helping, right? Into healthcare. This dependency on drugs is not something that needs to continue. We need to have other modes of providing care. And if we are going to use day-to-day technology, when we think about holistic care, why not incorporate that? But then again, as we build those out, how do we truly know? Now, the positive, it has the power of customizing, right? Here's how Lucky thinks, here's how Maya thinks, here's how Asif thinks. So I'm going to actually compute and make sure that I'm catering to them and helping them ensure they're consciously living versus their subconscious brain is also coming to the forefront. The downside of it, again, is that until we get to that point, how do we ensure that it is not going to impact Maya negatively? How is she going to take that? Because my dependency now is also increasing. So I think it's really, when we think about health care and mental health, and be it the loneliness pandemic, be it depression, I think we need to think about it. Even within that, there's a component of holistic care. What are the different components that need to play a role? Do we actually need to have some sort of right network setup for caretakers to be involved? Do we need a human component at the back end of it that's recognizing what these patterns mean, that's interacting with these patients, right? We've heard of many companies that have looked at voice modulation to determine if someone, right, from a suicide prevention perspective, or if someone's having an episode, if they've got some sort of mental disorder and they're relapsing. However, even with that, then what's the next step, right? I get an alert, let's say, and I generally like to give my own example where it says, or it, and I get an alert that, okay, you're actually going to have, let's just, for instance, say a depressive episode that's upcoming, just based on your voice modulation and have you gone. What do I do with that, right? So there's going to have to be additional components that are going to have to go to play to help all of us at the individual level, because at the end of the day, we are all patients of some sort in the system, even if it's not mental health, right? So,
Yeah. And you made a good point. AI, we think of AI as something that we can just flip on, and all of a sudden somebody's getting replaced, something's changing. And AI really has to have an application, and to have an application, you have to have data. And then,
mhm.
how do you gather that data, and how do you feed that data to build something that could be fed through an algorithm? An example, when you go to there, and I'm not any, I don't know any, I'm just a novice, and I love to learn, but there's other ways. I think there's something called BMIs, brain matter interfaces, that they use to measure signals, and and that's the growing field in AI, where more leaning towards, there's the psychology, where you work with individuals, and then there's the chemistry, and then there's like, okay, let's measure the signals, and how can we modify signals, like through Neuralink. There's a huge, are we going to become cyborgs at one point, or do we become more soft? Do we understand that not everything has to be done through a pill, like you said, through, there is a where the person, so through socialization, through some kind of support, that maybe is closer to what we need, other than maybe getting modified somewhat. And so I think if you were to ask Elon Musk, he'd be like, you know what, I can put a neural link on you. If you feel sad, we'll press a button, you feel happy. Is that a possibility? Do you see that one day, or is that just something that me, as from the outside, I'm just wishing for?
No, I think it's definitely a possibility, right? Neurally, Synchron, like Neuralink, Synchron, all these companies are trying to do it. And I think there is a possibility again. I mean, I wouldn't have thought in my lifetime that AI would move so right. I wouldn't have thought, even about a decade ago, that we were going to be where we are today. So in that sense, it is a possibility. I think there is, again, a lot of good that can come out of it, right? We're helping paralytic patients who couldn't move, who have a lifetime of debilitation. Now, through these technologies, we can help them. We're trying to work on, okay, through the neuronal signals, can we give a signal that allows their body to actually have movement, right? So it is mind-blowing in that sense.
I get
Um,
chills all over, with
and
that.
I do think, again, I think, Lucky, it is a possibility. I think it's going to happen. It's coming now, right? Where, again, with KPIs, with something that's metrics, for example, for paralysis, we can measure the movement. So those are areas where it's going to probably go more rapidly. With certain things like mental health, how do you measure it? How do you measure how depressive someone is, right? We don't have good quantitative measures around these things. So those become a bit more difficult. So I think they're going to be very different paths depending on what healthcare issue we're trying to tackle. Although all of, again, both related to our brains and how it functions. Could we lead to a time where we say, let me press this button, it's going to shoot these neurons. I'm not going to be depressed. I'm actually, right, going to have a burst of joy or happiness right now. Possibly. But again, right, that's where, for me, I feel, again, there's the case of what cases are we going to use it in? Because even there's a spectrum of patients who have depression, right? Like from major depressive disorder to people who are just getting anxiety, starting with anxiety. And we've got a spectrum of individuals, even right across the other different mental disorders, people who have agitation. I mean, both of you are very aware of these, some of these people with PTSD. How do we manage those PTSD? There's other things that come with it, isn't it? So I think as we think about individuals again, what is the end goal? Is it just a temporary relief? Because we can get that with drugs right now. We can get that by, hey, I'm going to go and I don't know, go bowling, or I'm going to go bungee jumping, and you get that rush, right, immediately. And you're like, I feel great, and I'm going to go and seize life. And then we're back home and we're like, oh, now it's the day-to-day minutia, right? Until you go bungee jumping again or do rock climbing or something. So I think that it's important to know how much of, again, the point I keep coming back to is this dependency that we can create. I think we need to alleviate it and train our brains to naturally start reprogramming it, because everything in the brain is also reprogramming, right? I mean, we talk about generational patterns, we talk about trauma, we talk about all these things that trigger us. And I think it's going to be no different when we bring technology in. It's about not that immediate short-term results that we're getting from it, but how do we reprogram our brains to be sustainable, and for us to, again, I keep going back to the term consciousness, because we do need to be more conscious beings. I think even, right, we use such a small part of our brains to make conscious decisions, and the decisions that Asif said we make in a day, a lot of them are subconscious, right? I might be walking and take a pen and put it away in the case because somewhere I've got this slight OCD of organizing things, but it might not be a conscious act. I took the pen and put it. It's just something, oh, I saw it, I put it. Meanwhile, I'm consciously focused on what's the other thing, which is I need to log into this meeting. So I think that's the fear. I think we haven't figured out all the nuances of the human brain and ourselves yet. As we learn more about it, I think we're going to understand that there's, again, a lot more that we can do with these technologies. Is it a possibility? Absolutely. Can we get there? Surely. I feel it's very promising and I'm very excited about it. I wouldn't say I am fearful, but I think there is a component of, again, I go back to what I originally mentioned, which is bringing science, technology, business together, right? You talk to, I mean, life sciences is a very regulated industry. So there's a lot you need to do to prove. Technologists, when they think about things, right, they immediately say, oh, I just need people who can work on the technology. The go-to-market is easy. These people have sold products. These people have created the biggest companies known to mankind, right? Like we've gone through PayPal, we've gone through Amazon. So these are serial entrepreneurs and investors. So we just think, okay, how do I go to market? Now we're talking about bringing a regulated industry. We're talking about ourselves, bringing technology into it. and seeing how all those components work together, let alone the complexities of a human brain. If we talk about technology just from a perspective of neurodegeneration, right, and mental health, but nonetheless, I think that it's again going to be that dialogue that's going to be required. I think if we think about some of these technologies as it's only engineers that are going to work on it and take input from scientists and just going to create it, I think that is probably not the right path forward. I think you need a roundtable, you need a think tank, right? You need a think tank beyond the initial ideation, and you need these meeting of minds to come and say, hey, we're going to create something great that's going to help mankind, that's going to help humans, that's going to augment their lives, not stunt it, right? You don't want to augment one aspect and stunt the other. So I think it's going to require again um, multiple conversations, multiple iterations, and knowing and accepting what we don't know so that we can keep a pulse on it as we move forward with these technologies. We can't wait for that one moment to say we know everything about the brain.
Mhm.
You know, that's going to take ages to come. Today we know so much about the brain. We've actually right, we're with AI, and yet we don't know a lot of things about the brain. Otherwise we wouldn't have scientists working on it, right? So I think that that's where we need to be mindful of it. We need to be open, no matter what our discipline is, to a dialogue with other disciplines to say, how do we move this forward in a manner that is going to benefit us at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think in order to talk about BMI BCIs, let's put it here. Right, let's start here. Let's draw a thread into everything here. Right. So I want to talk about BMI BCI at the very end, but let's talk about the fact of, but let's just talk about the ontology of it. Right. It's the way of our being. Right. If we are the human that we've been humans for so long, and the humans that we will be soon, we will need to talk about how it is today, the being ontology that we have today, and the ontology with the BMI BCI. Right. But in the middle, I kind of want to talk about the spectrum of things. I kind of want to talk about the fact that what we're leading into, we are so comfortable with what we do today that what we're leading into, we cannot, get confused with the fact that what you have today is okay, but you don't want to push it that far, because if you do, there's no point of return, right? Because at that point it goes exponential, right? Exponential
Mhm.
means incrementally we've been getting to the point of where we are today. So where we are today is that if we see an image that helps you to calm down, or hear an audio that helps you to calm down, you are working with let's just call it like non-evasive, right? Because with the BMI BCI, it becomes very evasive at the end. The way we have been, our ontology as humans, and then what we have been doing with ourselves, with medicine, with all these tools to cope with anxiety, the mechanism of depression, triggering things. So that way, trigger is not necessarily a bad thing. Triggering isn't like you have to trigger something by self-motivation to change the course of your life, course of your day, course of the hour, course of that decision to say, I don't have to move this pen. I'm just going to leave it where it is. Matter of fact, I'm going to put more pen on top of that. How about that, right? So, like, it's a total mind shift that we're talking about here. But let's talk about the ontology of it really fast, right? Ontology is that we have feelings and we discuss feelings, but we don't discuss the other part of it, what you call the stunting of it, right? Feelings leads to beliefs. Belief is what feeling enables over and over, because when you believe in something, you want to believe a little bit more, but you're not calling it that. You're just saying, I like that feeling, so I'm going to go after that feeling again. Well, what you're enabling is that belief in you, right? That feeling and belief, right? So feeling is what we enable, but we stunt the belief part of it, right? Not necessarily, so don't think of belief as that context of like you believe in some
Yeah.
deity or something else, right? But the stunt of something, that belief part of it, is that we don't necessarily focus on that belief a lot, because we're generating feelings to feed that belief system more. Now, here's the third component that makes it scary for me, is that Because we have feelings and beliefs, we are absolutely not ready to take responsibility. So if we have lots of feelings and belief, we get caught up in feelings, not necessarily beliefs, but that keeps us away from taking responsibility. And so let me explain that a little bit more. Responsibility means we live in a society, so there is lots of responsibility that's shared, it's spread out, right? So if something happens to me, it's the other car driver that hit me, not necessarily me. Like I have no at fault, right? Responsibility, if you stack it in many different ways, you end up realizing that it's we don't take responsibility as a precaution. We take the responsibility afterward, right? It's like we're more used to that social sharing of responsibility. So when something happens to us, we're just like, oh, my responsibility is it wasn't mine until it happened to me, right? So with AI system, as we're moving forward with BMI BCI, we really have to be ahead of BMI BCI to say, how do we take responsibility of what we are today and this responsibility that we have generated for thousands and thousands of years of evolution and brain, how do we tweak that responsibility so that way, even if we go into the BMI BCI route, we know what we are responsible for and what somebody who will provide us with that service is responsible for. What do we know about them and what do we know about us, right? So ontology, the being that we are, we have this feeling that if somebody was to give us a way to control ourselves, that's what we need, because the belief system is through the pills, right? Like medicines. You take control of your body, but somebody else lets you take control of that body, right? So ontology, it's not necessarily set there, right? And we have lots of work just in that piece of that responsibility side of things. Because a business person has one responsibility, consumer has another responsibility. A user of AI has another responsibility. Because AI is a social problem, it's not necessarily an individual problem. Individually, you can take drugs and medicines and all sorts of things, do yoga, right? But if you do it socially, where everybody's accepting the fact that BCI, BMI is the war to be, what is our responsibility to say, well, okay, is it really though? Right? Right. We have to take that responsibility. So we have accepted form of, taking medicine and form of doing things to take care of our health, like go for hiking, right? Go for a long walk. Those are taking responsibility that we can do today.
Mhm.
We give that up because the BCI BMI shows up. And this is why I want to get into BCI BMI real quick, because BCI BMI will enable us to do what we do with our phone today, right? If you are feeling a depressive episode, if you're feeling of some sort of thing, you look it up in your phone and say, like, let me make myself feel a little bit better. That's a responsibility that we take for ourselves. BCI BMI, which knows your previous patterns, will say, based on the sequences of events, based on the patterns, this is the image I'll show you, and this is how you'll feel good, right? So instead of really doing anything other than expecting the BCI BMI to take care of us, how much caregiving do we give ourselves? Do we give away that part that we should go for a walk? Because think about it, that's a different sort of responsibility versus letting BCI BMI take over, right? Excuse me, BCI stands for brain computer interface, right? BMI is the other one. So BMI has been around for 30 some years. So when I exponential, this is what I mean by exponential. Because it's been around for 30 years, and because the hardware, software, and data is coming together 30 years later, all of a sudden you will see an exponential growth that will come to the market overnight. How much of it do we really want to outsource to somebody else or say, when it comes in place, I don't think about it. Just give it to me. I'll use it. Right. Should you learn about AI a little bit more? How AI can manipulate, how AI can do data sabotaging, data poisoning, and so many other tricks that AI has. Well, if you feel good, does that mean that's the end of all? No, you have to really understand how it is that it can do other things that you're not necessarily in control of, right? But you have to be responsible for it, right? So I'm going to leave it at that. I kind of want to put that into the spectrum of discussion because there's a whole lot to unpack, but ontology is a giant topic in large language model today. But we really have to take responsibility for I just want to crack a joke here. I don't take responsibility for anything in my life, good or bad, because I blame it on my ancestors. They set the motion in place. I'm just suffering from it. So, as an ancestor of the next generation, I would like to say that I want to kind of take responsibility So that way they live a little bit of better of a life, no matter what AI technology that they adopt to. But I want to take responsibility for them, knowing that they're going to say the same thing about me. I just had a horrible ancestor who didn't do the right things. so, so yeah, that's my thought on BMI BCI. I
Yeah, right.
appreciate
The generational stuff that he said we blame it on is, but Lucky, any thoughts that you have on it? And
the mic is on mute. I think it's on mute.
I'm sorry. That's sorry. You hit it right. You hit the nail on the head. You hit a very sensitive button for me, where it's like for me, and I'll just give you I just like you said, take a walk. Okay, I'm a technology guy. I all day, every day, I work on computers, and at some point, my mental health, being honest with you, it degrades to the point where, and it's not. I'm not, in the point where I feel suicidal, but it feels like you just want to kill yourself because you're just constantly doing, and then you want exposure, and then you get exposure to a walk, the outdoors, and all of a sudden, you're you have a different energy, and you don't know that. And some people would say, no, here's a pill, or maybe in the future we start using maybe BMI, and we don't get to gain that experience, that walk that says, hey, this is how you breathe. You don't necessarily have a magic something that sets you right. Sometimes you just need to go outside and look at the sun or breathe, right, in a different way. And that matters. That matters. We're not going to have an AI and it seems like we were going in that direction, but you're absolutely correct. There's caregiving, and then there's even your self care. Doing what needs to be. So I go out hunting, and it all of a sudden, and I don't really hunt anymore, but just to go out hiking and get outdoors changes your chemistry completely, and that is not really talked about enough. At least for me.
yeah, yeah, and I think it is right. It is important. Again, we've got the way I look at it. We've got our mind, we've got our body, we've got our breath. Three components to it. We can sit there controlling our minds, but our body's still going to take a hit. Our breath's still going to take a hit. We need to get outdoors. Again, like the examples I gave with bungee jumping, etc. These are examples that, okay, people do it regularly. People go hiking regularly. We tend to go hiking quite regularly, right? To get outdoors, I have to be by a tree. I have to be by a river. It's my happy place. It's a place that I need to be in touch with the soil, nature, plants. So I think that self-care, those things that you recognize that are going to help you live a healthy life, again, across these three elements, are so important. Breath still is not talked about as much as mind and body are, because that is such an important element as well. And when we think about our mental state, when we think about our physical state. So I feel there are in individuals that are heavily impacted, whether it be mental health, whether it be some sort of physiological problem, whether it be paralysis, whether it be some heart disorder, etc., where they need to live healthier lives, and where we bring in these tools to really help them feel healthier, to go about their day-to-day activities, is going to be important. I think what's going to be important in addition to that is even they as individuals do other things to live that, again, a 360 healthy life. And it's not right just sitting, like those weight loss things that we would see ads of, that are like, you sit there and it keeps working on your stomach and you're going to get those abs. And oh my God, the number of times I've been fascinated by it myself and looked at it, and I'm like, no, that's the last thing I want, to sit there. And then I'm just not even moving. There's no, blood flow to my brain. And again, right, this is where the more we understand our bodies, the more fun it becomes to think about these different elements of it. But I think, Asif, you hit on so many different points there. But so we've been talking a lot about how responsibly we need to look at AI, how it does have promise, but we need to be conscious about it, right? The other piece that you mentioned is, right, even with this idea of the feeling and us, our beliefs, and that brought up an interesting thought in my mind is when you think about we're not objective as humans, right? It's the
Uh-huh.
input that we have that causes like whatever reactions, things we have. And the goal would be with more consciousness that we are objective. We see things for what they are without judgment, without any um, type of reaction per se to situations. But AI could do that. So the positive is you putting data inputs, you're running an algorithm, and it actually has more ability to do that because it doesn't have that generational stuff. It doesn't have anyone to, right? I mean, it so so maybe there's like that's why I feel we need to bring it in areas where we need that objectivity. We need to bring it in healthcare. We need to bring it in areas where we need to augment an individual's health, not stunt it, right? We need to bring it in areas where we need to augment intelligence. But is it having an augmenting effect or is it actually stunting intelligence? And that's what we need to find use cases around and work around, right? Some of them, like in sciences, it's used for target identification. They're looking at how protein folding happens, etc. That's great because it's a very objective way of looking at, okay, based on these modulations, what's going on. Now, if I say, let me actually figure out that, okay, how do I think about things and let it tell me how I should be thinking about things. That's where that whole complexity really starts to come in is, what is that objective way of looking? Look at facts for what they are, but again, without losing that higher intelligence that comes with the human mind.
Yeah.
So we talked about a unknown unknown, right? So this is the point of the discussion where I introduce you to smart AI community.
Yeah.
So we've been doing this podcast for a very long time, and we said finally we have to do something more than just a podcast. Why don't we develop a community of people that are specialists, right? That's what
Mhm.
we do in this podcast anyway. This podcast is full of specialists that are not necessarily AI subject matter experts. So SMART community stands for specialist who uses methods to advocate for what they believe, which is that whatever that AI is, or AI isn't, or AI should be, or AI can be. How do you take specialists to understand methods of AI so they can advocate through research and training? Right. So if they're doing research and training, they should be able to speak on it, communicate on it comfortably, confidently too. That's another piece of it. So smart AI community is for those unknown unknown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you need a rocket scientist, now you're feeling comfortable about going to the space because the rocket scientists will give you some information that you probably don't need to learn rocket science. You just need to know enough to move forward with it. So what we did is we brought in industrial and organizational psychologists who would not necessarily think about AI, allow them to understand AI from a perspective that made them very comfortable to communicate how AI can advocate for them or how they can advocate for AI, right? It goes both ways. IO psychologists, one of the groups, we had other groups like military veterans who are very techy, but didn't understand statistical analysis. Is a statistical analysis important? You can bet it's the most important thing your brain has that allows it to do neural network using 86 billion neurons and hundreds and trillions of synapses. Statistical analysis at what enables these sort of things. So we don't teach them statistical analysis. We just tell them this is how you research and this is how you train yourself to advocate about statistical analysis. Because data is important. You will not stop hearing about data, but data
Yeah.
wouldn't do anything unless you can develop that pipeline through statistical analysis. So unknown, unknown, that component, that BCI, BMI, everything we've just talked about, there's an impact to it. There's pros and cons to it. Let me put actually one pros and cons based on the scenario Lucky has mentioned. If you don't have the hardware that you have to be in front of when you're sitting down in a chair, but that component, the hardware is with you anywhere you go, but as you go for a walk in the woods, it's doing your work for you. All you have to do is troubleshoot it time to time. So is that not the pros and cons of not having any hardware other than those minimal amount of hardware that we should be accustomed to? I call it silent AI or comfortable technology, right? These technologies are behind us, not in front of us. We don't
Yeah.
have to be a slave to a technology. That technology can move along with us, right? And is that a BMI, BCI capability? Absolutely. right? Because this device here enables me in so many ways that I don't have to worry about things to happen for next 100 days. I can have it done in the next 100 seconds. That's the difference, right? You have to have this silent AI or comfortable technology that enables us to get away from what it is that we are used to, that known, that known unknown. But now that we're moving into this unknown unknown with hardware, maybe our software will enable us to go for longer walk, more walk, right? And I'm still living the life that I'm supposed to be living, right? Take better care of myself. So, but we need a lot of specialists to come to this conversation. So the Smart AI community we've developed is because of that purpose, is to enable the specialists with enough information so that way they can drive those conversations where it needs to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Um, but Maya, what can I say about you being here? It just lit up the whole conversation of the whole another different direction. And this has been long due, by the way. Like this conversation needs to happen in this podcast. It's happening everywhere else. But we want to contribute to this conversation. We want to do more of it. So any opportunity that you see you want to come back, I'm looking forward to the episode 2 of this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think we just scratched the surface, right, today in terms of the possibilities. Then it comes down to like, okay, what are those different actions that we need to work on? And I'll end it with where Lucky started, right? Some of the things that can be done or that I'm very passionate about doing is we're talking about these cases of right mental health, like in loneliness. I do feel there is a space for this technology. There is, right, if we do it responsibly, if we have different people come together and say, because the people are not going to stop using it, like you said, us. If it is there, it's around in some form of the other. So how can we actually leverage it to benefit this pandemic, which is becoming such a big issue, not only in our country but globally? And how do we get right in front of it? I think the other point that you mentioned, I love it, is we are absolutely going to, if we do it right, we will have all this free time, right? Lucky for you to go hunting again regularly for us to do other things. And I think that's where, right, Elon Musk talks about it. He's like, well, the way his vision of the future is how we are not concerned about these day-to-day minutiae that we get caught up in. But it is exciting. I'm looking forward to the future of it. Hopefully, I can keep contributing my part to it, and you know, maybe even play a more active role in the industry as a whole. I think we're headed in that direction now, as a life science industry, and I look forward to continuing our conversations as well. But it was great to meet you, Lucky. Asif, as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Lucky, what do you think?
Yeah, no, we kind of borrow from the same cloth. We've seen technology for what it was and what it is, and the more we rely on these things to socially disconnect us, we're gonna have more issues with people having problems with, not being able to communicate and socialize, and they're gonna find themselves alone, lonely. And the more we prepare ourselves for that type of environment because of our technology, the better we'll be in the future. We got to, know, what as humans, what can affect us, and how do we get around that? How do we make ourselves better? So definitely, thank you for everything we've talked today, and it's been a pleasure.
Ay,
Likewise.
ay, ay, ay.
Ay, 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 ay.
I got it out.